Hello, friends. President Trump's return to the White House has brought a ferocious new crackdown on immigrants, with Immigration and Customs Enforcement, commonly known as ICE, acting as a spearhead of his hardline agenda. In 2025, the Trump administration has been pushing the limits of law and morality in pursuit of mass deportations, even to the point of invoking a zombie wartime law from 1798, to bypass normal immigration rules. As the Trump administration follows through on their racist rhetoric and their campaign to pledge to launch the largest deportation program in American history, the tactics being used, are unprecedented in American history, modern American history, rather. The result is a climate of terror across the nation for immigrant communities, as families fear that a knock on the door or a routine traffic stop could lead to the disappearance into a legal black hole. Less than a full year into Trump's second term, our country swirls with controversy involving immigration and deportation, from Alligator Alley to Secretary Kristi Noem's offensive ad campaigns, from Trump coining the term migrant crime to the weaponization of enforcement raids on workplaces, schools, and even hospitals, from shutting down the CPB-1 app and closing the primary legal pathway to asylum claims to Operation Midway Blitz in Chicago, from lawsuits against uncooperative judges to targets on legal immigration in the One Big Beautiful Bill. This show will discuss it all. But right now, I want to delve into the most jarring example of this Trump agenda: the illegal detention and deportation of migrants to a brutal mega prison in El Salvador, and the saga of one man caught in the gears of this policy. In mid-March of 2025, President Trump's team executed a secretive operation to deport hundreds of detainees from U.S. soil to El Salvador. On March 15th, using a proclamation under the long-dormant Alien Enemies Act of 1798, Trump ordered the removal of 238 Venezuelans, whom his administration truly dubiously linked to a criminal gang known as Trendy Negra. These deportees, many of whom had been told they were simply being sent back to Venezuela, were instead shipped to El Salvador without any chance to challenge their removal in court. The same flights also carried 23 Salvadorian nationals labeled as MS-13 gang members. Among them was 29-year-old Maryland resident Kilmar Armano Albrega Garcia, whose case I will return to in just a moment. To pull off this operation, the Trump administration struck a deal with El Salvador's president, essentially outsourcing detention. The U.S. agreed to pay roughly $6 million to El Salvador to hold the deportees for at least 1 year. This arrangement effectively treats human lives as pawns in an international transaction, raising serious legal and ethical questions. Not only was the Alien Enemies Act invocation extraordinary and, likely unlawful, experts noted it had never been used outside of a declared war and called its peacetime use a staggering abuse. But the deportations proceeded in defiance of U.S. court orders. In fact, when a federal court issued a restraining order to halt the removals, the administration all but ignored it and flew out the detainees anyway. This brazen move plunged the country into a constitutional crisis, the executive branch openly defying the judiciary's authority. For the hundreds of detainees shipped from the U.S., home is now a cell in El Salvador's infamous Semotiuk mega prison. This facility, a sprawling 40,000 capacity complex built for El Salvador's gang crackdown, has become notorious for inhumane and unjust conditions. Prisoners at Semotiuk are kept in brutal circumstances, extreme overcrowding, scant medical care, and routine abuse have all been documented by human rights observers. Reports indicate that over 300 detainees have died in Salvadorian custody in the past year alone, many showing signs of violent treatment. Images and footage released by Salvadorian authorities, often used as propaganda, show rows of tattooed inmates stripped to shorts, crowded together on concrete floors under heavily armed guard, a visual symbol of total domination. Once the U.S. deportees were handed over, Salvadoran officials immediately locked them down incommunicado inside CCOT. No phone calls, no visits, no contact with lawyers or families were allowed. In fact, neither the U.S. nor Salvadoran governments even released the names of those sent away, effectively disappearing them from public view. These enforced disappearances are a grave violation of international human rights law, warned Human Rights Watch, noting that the men have been placed outside the protection of the law entirely. For the detainees, this means indefinite, arbitrary detention in a foreign jail with no clarity on any legal process or eventual release. For their loved ones back in the United States or Venezuela, it means unbearable anxiety and anguish, as they have no idea if or when they will ever see their loved ones alive again. The human cost of Trump's deportation policy is perhaps best seen through the eyes of the families left behind. In late March and April, desperate relatives of the disappeared deportees held vigils and protests from Los Angeles to Caracas, pleading for information and for their loved ones' return. In one poignant scene, families gathered outside the Salvadoran embassy in Caracas, holding up photos of sons and husbands who vanished into CCOT steps. They carried signs with messages like, "My son is innocent," and "having tattoos is not a crime," a reference to how mere tattoos or being from a certain region like Agregua in Venezuela were enough for Trump's agents to label someone a gang member. It's important to note that many of those expelled had no criminal record at all, in the United States or elsewhere, a fact even ICE officials have acknowledged. Some were asylum seekers in the middle of legal proceedings, or immigrants who have lived peacefully in the United States for years. Shockingly, the criterion for expulsion in some cases was nothing more than mere suspicion that they might commit crimes in the future. This dystopian logic of pre-crime punishment has devastated hardworking families. Children went to bed not knowing why their fathers never came home. Wives frantically called ICE detention centers, only to be told no record of their husband exists in custody, as if he had been wiped off the books. In several cases, it was only through leaked lists and media reports that families confirmed their loved ones had indeed been sent to El Salvador. One can only imagine the terror and helplessness these families felt, watching the U.S. government, their own government, spirit away loved ones and then stonewall any attempts to find out what happened. In July of 2025, the Trump administration negotiated a prison exchange with Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, swapping over 250 citizens of Venezuela being held in CCOT for 10 imprisoned Americans and some Venezuelan political prisoners. Of course, with the release of these individuals, some good has come from the whole CCOT affair. But the ends certainly do not justify the means. The U.S. government faces deserved criticism for sending asylum seekers to CCOT in the first place, and for using human beings as political pawns. The released Venezuelans have reported severe abuses during their period of incarceration. And despite the efforts of immigration and human rights groups, the fate of El Salvadoran deportees remains unclear in all cases but one. Amid Trump's appalling immigration crackdown, one man's story has emerged as a dark symbol of cruelty and lawlessness. Gilmar Armando Abrego Garcia was born and raised in El Salvador, where his family was under constant threat and extortion from a gang called Barrio 18. With death threats hanging over him, Gilmar's older brother fled to the United States to escape the violent situation. The Barrio 18 gang then focused their attention on Gilmar, who was only around 12 years old at the time. Around 2012, at age 16, Gilmar followed his brother and crossed into the United States illegally to escape the gang's threats. Gilmar built a life for himself in the United States, growing up, working, and eventually dating an American citizen with 2 young children. In 2019, he and 3 other men were in a Home Depot parking lot looking for day labor work when police apprehended them for allegedly loitering. Despite no criminal charges or behavior, Gilmar was turned over to immigration officials, who detained him based on very shaky evidence that he was a member of a gang known as MS-13. A long legal battle ensued, and Gilmore was behind bars when he married his girlfriend, and when his son with her was born. He was deemed ineligible to apply for asylum, having missed the deadline for such claim. But after reviewing his case, an immigration judge eventually granted Gilmore a withholding of removal, a protection that required even more evidence of persecution than an asylum claim. Gilmore's withholding of removal legally barred him from being deported to El Salvador due to the likelihood he'd be persecuted by gangs that were located in that prison. In other words, the United States government knew that sending Gilmore back to El Salvador could be a death sentence for him, and it promised not to do so. Yet President Trump's dragnet ignored all of that. Gilmore was suddenly rounded up again in March of 2025 as part of the new expulsion campaign. Despite his pending protection, despite a lack of any criminal charges, he was put on one of the clandestine flights out of the country on March 15th. The Department of Homeland Security later sheepishly admitted that this should not have happened, calling it an administrative error. But it was far more than a paperwork glitch. It was an illegal deportation of the man the U.S. had committed to keep safe. Gilmore found himself dumped into Semotiuk prison, tossed in with actual gang members. The Trump administration, seemingly aware of how egregious this was, still publicly insisted Gilmore was the dangerous MS-13 operative, while, of course, still not indicting him for any crime at the time. In El Salvador, the president, who had aligned closely with Trump on security matters, echoed that line, pointedly refusing U.S. court requests by saying he would, quote, would not return Gilmore to the United States, and scoffing, how can I smuggle a terrorist into the United States? For him, Gilmore was a bargaining chip and a propaganda token. For Trump, he was a useful example to tout in the tough on crime narrative. For Brago's wife and 3 children back in Maryland, however, this was a nightmarish ordeal of separation, uncertainty, and cruelty. Gilmore's unlawful removal set the stage for a showdown between Trump and the American judicial system. Almost immediately, lawyers filed suit to demand the government bring Gilmore back to U.S. soil. By early April, a federal judge in D.C. ordered the administration to effectuate his return, only to be met with delay and defiance. The case climbed all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court, where even the conservative justices appointed by Trump agreed that something had gone gravely wrong. On April 10th, in a 9-0 unanimous order, the Supreme Court instructed the Trump administration to at least facilitate Gilmore's return from El Salvador. It was a remarkable moment. The highest court in the land, including Trump's own allies, effectively telling the president that he must correct an injustice that his policies created. Yet even after a Supreme Court rebuke, Trump dug in his heels. The court did not set a firm deadline, and Trump exploited that wiggle room, initially refusing outright to comply. We don't want them back, the president declared bluntly when asked about the prospect of returning Gilmore or others. Can you imagine you spend all of that time, energy, and money on getting them out, and then you have a judge that sits there, no, bring them back, Trump scoffed, openly ridiculing the idea that a court could overrule his will. To Trump, admitting error or obeying a judge's order to undo his deportation was an anathema. It clashed with the strongman image he has cultivated. This stance, a president defying the courts, sent shockwaves throughout Washington. This is about a president of the United States defying the Supreme Court and wanting to be king, warned Representative Robert Garcia as Congress members raised alarms. Lawmakers noted that if a president can ignore court orders at will, the basic system of checks and balances is in peril. In protest, a group of Democratic legislators scrambled to organize an extraordinary oversight mission. They sought to visit the Salvadorian prison themselves to check on the deportees and assert that America had not forgotten them. We have to show action. This president is dangerous, and we can't let this go, said one congresswoman, decrying what she called a dystopian attack on our constitutional rights. The deportation policy, moreover, appeared poised to expand. Trump began boasting about sending homegrown criminals, even U.S. citizens, to foreign prisons next, a move that would shatter even more legal precedents. The conflict between Trump and the rule of law was coming to a head, with Gilmar's fate as the focal point. Ultimately, after months of standoff, the reality of the Supreme Court's authority and mounting political pressure forced a resolution. Well, at least in Gilmar's individual case. In a face-saving move, Gilmar Abrego Garcia was finally brought back to the United States, but not as a free man rejoining his family. In a dramatic twist that speaks volumes about the administration's motives, Gilmar was returned under arrest, hit with a surprise federal indictment of human trafficking-related charges. On Friday, June 6, Trump's Justice Department revealed that the grand jury in Tennessee had charged Gilmar with conspiracy to transport undocumented immigrants, allegedly stemming from a 2022 traffic stop. In essence, after refusing to comply with court orders for weeks, U.S. officials went to El Salvador and showed the president an American arrest warrant, which finally compelled Bukele to release Gilmar back into U.S. custody. Attorney General Pam Bondi triumphantly announced the return and proclaimed, "This is American justice," as if to frame the development as proof the administration was right all along. However, critics see it very differently. To Gilmar's attorneys and immigrant rights activists, these sudden and highly dubious charges are blatantly manufactured to help Trump save face. After all, for 6 years, Gilmar lived in Maryland without any hint of a federal criminal case against him. Even as ICE was labeling him as a gang member, they never charged him with a crime. Now, conveniently, he is painted as a coyote in an international smuggling ring, a characterization his lawyers ridicule as absurd. There's no way a jury will look at the evidence and think that this metal worker is a kingpin of an MS-13 human trafficking conspiracy, says one of Gilmar's attorneys, calling the indictment baseless. The timing of the charges, coming only after legal avenues forced the administration's hand, strongly suggests that the government needed a pretext to justify why it was bringing Gilmar back. Rather than admit they deported an innocent man unlawfully, they are now trying to cast him as a criminal to retroactively rationalize their actions. As of now, September in 2025, Gilmar's battle with the U.S. government rages on. I won't try to describe the ins, outs, and suspicious details of these complicated legal proceedings, but will conclude by saying that Gilmar's illegal deportation allows him authority to reapply for U.S. asylum. Likewise, the Trump administration has found their own loophole to avoid having to open America's arm to someone they considered such a dangerous threat to national security. On Friday, August 22nd, Gilmar was released into his brother's care pending trial in Tennessee. He returned to Maryland and spent 1 weekend with his family before ICE once again took him into custody on Monday, shipping him off to be held in Virginia. What lies ahead for Gilmar Abrego Garcia is, of course, uncertain. Over the past 2 weeks, Trump has threatened to deport him to 4 different countries. He's been promised deportation to Costa Rica if he will plead guilty to human trafficking charges, or to Uganda if he does not. The government is also claiming they can send him back to El Salvador if he dares to open an asylum case. Then, just last Friday, ICE declared their intention to ship Gilmar away to Estonia, a tiny African nation, formerly known as Swaziland, has reportedly agreed for tens of millions of dollars to align with the United States agenda to detain immigrants in countries where they have no citizenship, family, nor connections. Beginning this July, 5 men with criminal convictions have already been imprisoned there, including at least one Jamaican national who completed his prison sentence and has no further criminal charges. The terror that ICE has been meting out across the nation under Trump's second-term agenda is not just a series of tough immigration policies. It's an assault on the rule of law and on basic human dignity. In the span of a few months, we have witnessed the U.S. government spirit away people to secretive foreign jails, flout court orders, and attempt to rewrite the narrative only when cornered. Families have been torn apart with no regard for due process, and vulnerable people have been cast into inhumane conditions abroad for the spectacle of appearing tough on crime. It is a playbook reminiscent of authoritarian regimes. Demonize a group, ignore the courts, and use state power to instill fear. Yet even in this dark chapter, there are glimmers of accountability. The courts, including the Supreme Court with a conservative majority, drew a line, however tentative, affirming that no one is above the law. Journalists, human rights organizations, and activists have worked tirelessly to expose what's happening behind the walls of CCOT and within ICE's detention centers. Brave families and lawmakers are speaking out, refusing to let these stories be buried. The battle is, of course, far from over. Legal challenges continue to wind through the courts, and a new lawsuit now targets the very arrangement that sent immigrants to El Salvador's prison, arguing its illegality. History shows that silence in the face of state brutality is complicity. And so the onus is on all of us to stay informed and demand better. Donald Trump's immigration crackdown is not about law and order. It's about fear and power. It's about using ICE as an instrument of terror to shore up his political base, no matter the collateral damage to innocent people or to constitutional governance. But America is more than any one president. In the face of this campaign of terror, there remains a united front of citizens, lawyers, judges, and public servants determined to uphold the values of justice and humanity. We must shine a light on these abuses, support the victims and their families, and insist that America does not become the very thing it claims to stand against. The story of Gilmar Armanio Abrego Garcia and the hundreds of others disappeared in a foreign prison should serve as a wake-up call. Only by confronting these truths can we begin to roll back this reign of terror and save the soul of our country. And that, my friends, is the final word up front. Today, we welcome to the show a guest with true authority to break down and explain the unlawful deportation of Gilmar Abrego Garcia and so many others. Andy Semotiuk is a U.S. and Canadian immigration and human rights lawyer based in Toronto, practicing at Pace Law Firm. And we are delighted to have him with us to shed light on the injustices of Trump's recent policies and actions. And Andy will be joining us right after the break. Andy Semotiuk has a long and illustrious resume practicing law. As previously mentioned, he currently fights for human rights in Toronto, Ontario. But he is also a member of the bars of New York, California, and British Columbia. Andy practiced law in Los Angeles for 10 years, worked in New York for 5. As a former United Nations correspondent in New York and a longtime Forbes contributor whose articles on immigration have been read by over 1 million readers, he brings his global insights to discussions about law, migration, and human rights. He served for 3 years on the tribunal panel of the Canadian Human Rights Commission and is a senior advisor to the Center for Eastern European Democracy, a past president of the Canada-Ukraine Foundation, and a distinguished Toastmaster. He has taught at universities in the United States and Canada. And if that's not enough, Andy is also the author of 4 amazing books, including The Young Professional, a real-world survival guide for new college graduates. And now I am honored to bring on a leading voice on refugee and human rights issues and someone I consider a true hero. Andy, welcome to the program.
John, thank you so much for having me. And I just loved that editorial comment that you put together regarding Garcia. I thought that was spectacular.
Thank you. I had a hard time getting through that. It's a very emotional story.
It is indeed. Very upsetting.
It is very upsetting. And I want to ask you, in your opinion, how would you characterize the overall shift in U.S. immigration law since Trump's return to power?
I've been around a long time, since the 70s. And I've never seen a state of immigration confusion and chaos as we witness it today. The problem is lawlessness. What good is there to having a Supreme Court or courts if the law is not complied with, if the executive branch is not prepared to abide by the rulings of the judiciary? There's a, I mean, this could be quite a complicated analysis to, provide all the details about why this is happening. But a few of the key elements are an intolerance on the part of the executive branch of government to, the key thing is to people who are in the United States and have lived here for many years, these 11 million people, 2/3 of which have been here for more than 10 years and have contributed to society and built up their equities by their contributions in their families, their churches, their community groups, their work, their taxes, etc., but who are being disregarded and called criminals. And they're not criminals. Many of them came, well, all of them, virtually, not all, but most came from dire circumstances overseas or abroad, seeking a new life in the United States. Many came and overstayed visas, such as visitors' visas. That's the main category of people who are here in so-called undocumented status. But they're being categorized as criminals, all of them, that they're all criminals. And like you can call a guy speeds and gets caught speeding and he's called a criminal, and that's enough to deport the guy. The guy gets a speeding ticket, or let's say a parking ticket, and so I mean there's no rationality in what's going on. It's just state power being exercised for the sake of ridding the country of these people, supposedly for the benefit of a better life in America. Somehow, because of the disposition of all these people.
Yeah, no, it's just cruelty, unabashed cruelty.
Yeah,
for the sake of being cruel. I mean,
what I see happen. Okay, this is my analysis. What I see is martial law in slow motion.
Yeah,
what's happening is the police, who are doing their job reasonably well in the states, in the blue states that are under attack right now, being supplanted by these National Guard and the ICE officials that are coming in. And over time, I believe what's going on is a preparation for the midterms to avoid the election of people from the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
So that the Republicans can continue to rule into the next or the remainder of Trump's term, and then onward from there. I think they're planning big things beyond 28 or whatever it is that Trump's term expires.
Well, I mean, Trump has openly professed the possibility of running for a third term.
Yes, which is, I mean, it's unconstitutional, basically. Right. And here's a problem. If you're a lawyer like me or others, in a lawless society, lawyers are meaningless. If the laws are not abided by, if the courts are not listened to, if the police don't abide by the law, if the army is invoked in suppressing the majority of people in a state, the lawyers lose their power, and then we're stuck. The voices that are still standing up for constitutional democracy, which is the key thing in the United States, constitutional democracy and the rule of law. Maybe it's a good idea just to define what is the rule of law.
Right.
The rule of law basically is a state where an ordinary citizen in a society can conduct his or her affairs with the expectation that normally they are able, provided they comply with the law, to lead their lives free of any interference from government and from any troubles. It's a predictable state of existence in society because the society is democratic, by and large, abides by human rights, and respects people's rights, even rights of minorities who, by virtue of the respect that is contained in the Constitution, have rights that need to be respected. That's basically the rule of law as I see it. But the problem is what institutions basically protect the rule of law? The courts, well, the Constitution first and foremost. And these people who are in power swear allegiance to that Constitution. They swear that they will abide by the Constitution. The courts are there to enforce the constitutional rights of citizens. The police are there to police day-to-day affairs and ensure everybody's safety and care. And then, in theory, the executive branch is supposed to enforce, like to execute the laws as they are on the books, adopted by Congress. And Congress is another institution that, in theory, protects us as citizens in a democratic society by passing laws and by the setup of the government constitutionally being states and federal government, and the conflict, to the degree there is conflict between those two powers, leads citizens or protects citizens' rights by virtue of the fact that no government, state or federal, can disregard citizens' rights by the fact that the other federal or state government seeks to enforce the rights in accordance with the Constitution. So this federalism, the setup of the country in the way that it's framed in the Constitution by those who framed the Constitution, our founding fathers, it was set up in a way where power, those who exert power, are limited in their exercise of power by virtue of constitutional guarantees on the part of people, the Bill of Rights, for example.
Right.
But the whole key to the whole scenario is not government power, but the limits to government power and how those limits are enforced. And at the moment, we are on a runaway scenario where the federal government is like a great example in my book was over Labor Day weekend. They had a plane full of children that they were deporting in the middle of the night. And it had to be stopped by a judge who had to be woken up. I think it was Sunday morning at 2 a.m. to issue an order to stop these planes from taking off and taking children back to countries where they're going to be just dropped off and left there to who knows what. This is an amazing event that they did it on a weekend, long weekend, in the middle of the night to deport all these children back to some countries without any arrangements being made about what's going to happen to these children and so on. Like, that is a litmus test of what is going on in America in the immigration space and why it's alarming. It's like a bugle call to all of us to pay attention from day to day as the government violates again and again the requirements, the legal requirements of how the immigration system and indeed the society should operate.
Well, and it's not just immigration. I mean, we're seeing an authoritarian assault on
Yeah.
everything that is supposed to be democratic in this country.
Yeah.
I mean, the dispatching of the military to blue states. I mean, all of this is political. It's politically motivated.
Yeah.
It's all a pretext.
But we have to, I don't know about you, but in my case, I wonder, okay, I get that, President Trump and his loyalty appointees are exerting their power to the degree they are. But where are the people below them? Where is America? Where are the people who are not standing up and calling these people out for every step that's going on? I don't get that part. Like, okay, 50%, let's say, of America supports this, or less than 50%. Like if you look at the polls, I think it's less than 50% are happy with what's going on. So there's a disconnect between the base that elected these officials and their conduct and what they're doing in terms of the day-to-day affairs of America. And you mentioned, that it's not just immigration. Well, it isn't. Robert Kennedy and, what's going on with Kennedy right at the moment in health is a deep source of concern. But maybe these are all symptoms of, some of the most serious difficulties in the United States. One is, in my view, the disparity in wealth.
Yes.
And not only disparity, but for some reason, the cluster of what appear to be oligarchs that are around Trump. Okay, Musk broke off, but there are all these seriously wealthy individuals who are running huge, economically huge and powerful organizations, Facebook and all these leaders that are clustered around Trump and aren't calling him out on what's going on. You would think, okay, it's one, these organizations, Facebook, ChatGPT, etc., the big IT organizations, you would think that they are at the front edge of freedom of speech and liberalism, an open society to enable them to function in terms of what they're trying to do, the research they're doing into new ways of thinking, bringing out AI and so on. But no, they are not, like, their conduct and what they are doing relative to Trump is they're on his team. They're backing him in terms of, and they're not shouting out, they're not calling out every misstep. It seems like they're in step with him.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
To me, it's shocking. Like, and forgive me, I don't mean to be overly bellicose on this thing, but so the disparity in wealth, but also those who are wealthy. Even you could, okay, there might be disparity in wealth, but you still hope that in such situations, these people would speak out nonetheless, even if they are wealthy and oligarchs. There's still a reason for hope there that they would speak out in favor of the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and so on. But that's not what's happening. They're shut up. That you don't hear anybody, and none of them are calling out the administration's clampdown, the ICE, the attacks, and the Hyundai attack. They're going into alienation of South Korea, for example. Like these tariffs and the tariff international sort of policy and what it's doing in terms of the allies that America has had and where those allies are today. It's like philosophically, it appears that the administration seems to think they can go it alone, that we don't need allies. America doesn't need any allies. Allies are just bloodsuckers that are going to take up American money out of the country and are undeserving of our support and help. And that these events that are taking place overseas, Ukraine for one, Gaza for another, seem to be of no concern or little concern to the administration. Or if it is a concern, it's a verbal concern, but in conduct, there appears to be no alarm or concern for what are taking place, these events that are taking place, the wars overseas. But again, that's the administration. But where are the voices below the administration? Where are voices like yours? They're far and few apart.
Well, there's a culture of fear. I mean, you see what's happening. I mean, you look at the pro-Palestine protesters who are being rounded up and deported or threatened. The universities that have been silenced. There's a culture of fear that is very, very real. Now, you mentioned martial law earlier, and I agree with you. I think that's where we're heading, and it's a very scary time right now. And I don't know. It seems like we have a failure of our institutions across the board, and I have a hard time seeing any optimism as far as what the outcome is going to be.
You mentioned universities. Just think about this. Who in their right minds would attack a university such as Harvard, which is the jewel of education in the world, which is a leading educational institution in the world in terms of health and science and technology and so on? Who in their right minds would attack such an institution for trumped up reasons? For reasons like, I get it. Okay, if there's some kind of a lunatic in there and they're tearing the university apart and so on. Okay, I get it. You have to clamp down on that. But there does not appear to be any significant reason for the attacks on Harvard, Columbia, etc. Yes, there were demonstrations there, and anti-Semitism is a concern. I'm not saying it's not a concern, but not to the level where you're taking money away from these institutions for what appear to be bogus reasons. I don't get that. And, the whole, there are other elements, this gerrymandering, where they're redefining the polls, electoral districts so that they can get more votes this way or that way. There seems to be a lack of ethics and morale. I mean, how in the world does a person with the kind of record that Trump has get to become president of the United States? How does he become the leader of the Republican Party with the kind of record that he has? I would think that every party should have a clear ethical rules on who can even run, right? Like, what are you doing behind? But let me define what is the key line, the red line in my world about what's going wrong with the United States. The world lines up this way. Who won the election between Biden and President Trump? Not this time, but last time. If you line up with Trump saying that was a false election, I don't think you're in this, you're not real in this world.
Right.
I think that's a defining thing. And to have pardoned those people who attacked the Capitol, in my view, that's where the wheels fell off the wagon. Those two events. And like, if you have any doubt about the election question, there's a book called The Road to Wisdom, written by Francis Collins, who used to be the director of the National Institute of Health, in which he goes over the election and all the details about the election. There's no doubt about it. That election was lost by Trump. But there are people in power today, Patel and a few of the others in there, who still don't acknowledge. Like, I don't get it. Like, how do you deal with people like that? Those are two, to me, the most apparent ways that we have gone into the ditch. That those are things that just ask anybody you're dealing with who won that election. If they're on Trump's side, we got a problem. That person does not know reality. There's no truth in that person's life. And the same thing about getting these people free from the January 6th thing. I mean, if you supported that, there's a problem there. It's not a there's dishonesty there.
Oh yeah,
that's the problem. Like, so I mean, those are some of the conditions that we're facing, and I don't think that any of this is news to you or people who follow the news from day to day. And it just seems one after, like, Trump is closer to Putin than he is to his own bureaucracy and the advisors that are advising him. This whole parade in China recently, with all these leaders lining up, including India's leader, Modi, like, that's incredible. And this is the world that's shaping up now. It's America's losing its leadership in the democratic world, or not paying attention to what it should be doing in the democratic world. And it seems like Trump is almost on Putin's side in terms of what Putin wants. Although the words are, well, we're going to punish him. There's a line here, 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks. Meanwhile, biggest attack on Ukraine just the other day, since the war started, biggest attack on Ukraine. Attack on who? Citizens. Like children killed, women killed, old people killed. Not on military targets, but on, like, wow, what kind of world do we live in? And same with Gaza, all these people dying, like, from starvation. No child should ever die of starvation in the world, anywhere. Yeah. I don't know. Look, I'm not God. I don't have the answer to every problem. It's a complicated world. But I have a sense of personal, I hope I do anyway, personal decency. And I call a spade a spade. Calling a spade is I tell the truth even when it hurts me, when I don't feel very happy about maybe it compromises something that I have done or whatever. But that's what I call, there's a civility to that. There's, like, admitting you're wrong, for example, once in a while, is part of being a human being. Like, we're humans, human beings make mistakes. So it's one thing. I feel like I'm sort of preaching to people about, again, I'm not God. I don't know the answer to all these issues, but this is my view of what's going on. And I think every one of us has a view, and it's your duty to express your views and to take matters seriously when human rights in particular are being violated.
Yeah.
Like, and speak out. So uh, I don't know where Congress is. Our Congress is, it's not functioning.
Yeah, it's very dysfunctional.
Yeah, like all these emergencies are being declared. Once in a while, I'd like to see Congress say, well, no, there's no emergency here. Where do you see an emergency? Like
Yeah.
Trump is usurping the congressional powers in tariffs, for example. Like, and it's doing harm to our allies, not only to us, but to our allies. The allies are thinking, well, what's wrong with it? What happened to America? Where's the leadership? In this troubled world, where is our leadership? And if you think, like since World War II, the UN and all these meetings and all that, like, Helsinki Accords and Budapest Memoranda, and all these agreements and things that evolved over time, and the international rules-based order, and the human rights bodies that have been created, the International Court, Criminal Court, that all these developments are essentially being emasculated by the decisions being made in Washington today. It's troubling.
It is troubling. And I would argue, too, that it's not just Trump. And it's not just the Republican Party that's complicit. The Democratic Party, under Barack Obama, there was mass deportations.
Yes.
Barack Obama killed American citizens in Afghanistan, I believe it was, using drones. We sort of have the machinations of an authoritarian state coming from both parties. And where are the Democrats right now? They're sending strongly worded letters to Trump as if that's going to do anything.
Yeah. I admire some of them, like some of the Democratic leaders, because they're speaking out against Trump. I admire even Republicans who are speaking out when the time is right for them to speak out on matters, such as in the health issues I noticed recently in the hearings. I admire those people. There are Americans who I admire very much. Following the January 6th disruptions in the Capitol, they had those hearings, and there were both Republicans and Democrats investigating what happened and coming up with a report. Cheney is one Republican who I admire very much, Elizabeth Cheney.
Yes. And it cost her her career.
Yeah, unfortunately it did, yeah. But I don't think it's all over just yet. I think people like that could still come back. Here's someone who I'm wondering, well, where are these people? Former presidents, especially Republicans. What happened to the Bushes? Not a peep out of the Bushes. I don't get it.
Yeah.
Guys like Romney was another one that was kind of a dissident in that book, in that chorus, so to speak. But where's he? I don't hear much from him now. But there are these voices that could speak up. The Democrats are not saints either. I agree with you. They're not saints. They could do better. And it's our job to call them out too. This is about truth and fairness all across the board. Listen, I spent half my life in the United States, the other half of my life in Canada. So I got a good vision from two countries. I went to high school in the United States, in Los Angeles. The educational system in the United States, it's checkerboard. It depends where you live, whether you get a good education or not. It could be improved. The healthcare system in the United States could be improved. Of course, I'm not saying Canada's perfect, but Canada's doing quite well in terms of education and health for those. There's criticism you can level against Canada and others, UK and so on. But their education seems to me to be a really critical area to teach kids to be critical about ideas, not just to wholesale buy some. It's not the catechism approach. It's got to be, who is this guy? Why is he saying this? What's at stake? Well, when you hear someone talking about political events or presenting ideas to you, you need to teach kids to think and to be critical. I think that's an important role for education. And if we're going to change things around, education, I think, has to be a key area of attention for overcoming some of the difficulties in America. I love America. I'll tell you that right now. I love America. There's a lot of good people and a lot of good in America. Not everybody's Satan. And even, okay, maybe get it. Listen, I get it if you make mistakes, you make decisions that are bad, even terrible decisions. I get it. So long as you admit,
right,
after you say, oh my goodness, what have I done? I'm sorry. I made him, but not this doubling down on stupidity and carry on. I don't get that part. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I I look at America and I'm very disillusioned. I see a country democratic backsliding. I see a country that seems to have no regard for human rights, either domestically or abroad. And again, I look across administrations and I just ask, is this what America stands for?
I agree with you, but I also I'm not a nihilist. I see good in America. I know there are good people there. Their voices haven't been,
right,
outspoken, and and they could be more outspoken and demanding of their Congress people and of the senators. I think at that level down below there, I think more work has to be done. They have to be more vociferous in what they want their people in Congress to do for them, their representatives in government. And I think Congress has to, the people in Congress have to really wake up and get working. Because really, I mean, I don't think it's a revelation to say that, judiciary, executive, and legislative, and Congress seems to be, I don't know what they're doing out there. I mean, they passed that great big bill, and I had some difficulty with that bill. I'm thinking, lots of money for enforcement, and like ICE and so on, right? Enforcement, but the other side, healthcare, social programs, mental health, for example, it's missing. It's complete. I don't see anything in there.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't despair. I mean, sometimes I do, but I think there's a way out from here, and the way out is for intelligence. I would say this: if you're not reading books, it's time to start reading books.
Yes.
I don't think we can live on daily podcasts. Forgive me, we're on a podcast. But I don't think that's enough. I think people need to read books. It's something that is desperately needed as well. And it's people like you that are drawing attention to serious discrepancies and shortcomings, like this editorial you just gave, this presentation, wasn't like, I could see you really did a good job on that. You gave us all the facts. It's the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help you God. And that's the kind of work we need a lot, in a lot of areas. And there are people.
There's a war on truth.
Yes.
I mean, I like to say that Americans are the most propagandized people on the planet in a lot of cases. We have a corporate media establishment that does not, that is, their job is to repress dissent in many cases. I mean, I don't know how it is in Canada, but this corporate media apparatus that we have is just a problem. I mean, it's a corporatized media bubble that works as an echo chamber.
Yeah. Just in a comparison to Canada, I would say the level of discourse is still higher in Canada in terms of respect for one another,
Yes,
generally speaking,
I would
than
agree
it
with
is in the United States. There's a crudity to the way people are conducting themselves in the United States, or at least to the way laws are being implemented in the United States. But I also see like Newsom and Pritzker and people like that. Um, I like what they're doing. I like their outspokenness. It's not because I'm a Democrat and I want Democrats.
Right.
It's not that. I like the fact that they are calling people out for misconduct in terms of what the rules should be and where we are with the rules. But
But is it genuine or is it just political? That's my question.
well, let's put it this way: there is a political benefit involved for them to be what they're doing, but I don't see them sold out in terms of what they're saying to the same degree that I believe the people around Trump are, the loyalists that are appointed in the Trump circles. Those loyalists don't appear like they don't appear to have much of a spine, like it's spineless. If the criterion for getting appointed to these high offices is loyalty first and everything else second, we're working backwards. We need to change that. So now, I'm not sure. I concede that there is some political benefit to these people speaking out the way they are, but I would think that they would speak out even if they were not in positions of power to with respect to the same issues. I don't think their views would change on that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's a judgment call, but that's the way I see it.
Well, I mean, I've got a lot of problems with Governor Newsom. I mean, his crackdown on homelessness was disastrous and cruel. His, a lot of his policies. I mean, I have a problem with neoliberalism in general. I don't know if you're familiar with.
Okay. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I'm not. Put it this way: I don't have any skin in the game like these people may have, of the kind you're talking about. Like, I'm not wed to any particular party,
right?
And I'm not trying to advance one party over another. I mean, it's not that. I'm trying to, as best I'm trying to call a spade is the way I see it. I believe in human rights. I believe in the Bill of Rights. I believe in the Declaration of Independence. I admire the founding fathers by and large. I mean, that's the direction I'm sort of inclined to go in. Some things I'm not familiar with, so I can't, because I'm not familiar, I can't really speak on that. So I try to talk about things I'm more familiar with, and that's why the discussion is going the way it is. But I'm happy that you have this program and that you're doing what you're doing. I have to admit, I was not aware of your work, but I like the work you're doing. I think it's great work.
Well, and I love the work that you're doing. I mean, you are. I mentioned in the monologue that I consider you a hero. I mean, you're fighting for immigrants' rights. You're fighting for human rights, and that is exactly what we need right now in this country and throughout the world. Quite honestly, I mean, we're seeing what's happening in the United States is not just isolated to the United States. we're seeing democratic backsliding throughout the world.
Yes, we are.
The rise
There's
of Zionism and all of that is on the increase, and that's a frightening situation for us.
It is. There are moments of great alarm. For example, Macron, his prime minister, just got defeated,
Yes.
and so there's a drift over to the right in that world, and that's shaking up the degree to which Macron can exert his, which appears to me to be fairly positive leadership on the international scene. And the world also has this disparity of wealth and what's going on. Like, there are tremendous issues for us to face on the international level. And allow me just to mention, in my field, in the field of immigration, there are I think it's 110 million people who are displaced in the world right now, drifting they don't have a home. They're just drifting. Now, many of them, I don't know how many, 45 million or something, are true refugees that are, spread all over the world. And many of those are in refugee camps, where there's 1 million people in a camp, for example, refugee camps. And people have to make a go of it in the camps to survive and live there for decades, and sometimes generations. That's one problem that is very significant and involves, Europe and the migration of people from Africa to Europe, for example, and in our case, people from South America coming northbound and elsewhere coming to the United States. And that's an overwhelming problem. America, as good as it may be, and if it wanted to solve that problem, could not solve it by itself. It's a bigger problem than America. It's a world problem. It has to be addressed on a world level. Just as climate change is a world problem, it has to be addressed.
Well, and climate change is directly related to the refugee crisis.
Yes, it is.
As is U.S. foreign policy. I mean,
Yes,
the wars, the sanctions. I mean, we've destroyed so many economies.
Yeah.
Not to mention the dictators and the coups that we've waged that have crumbled governments.
Yeah.
It's no wonder why there's an influx of refugees throughout the world, and it's only going to get worse.
Put it this way. I'm comforted by a statement that Mother Teresa once said. And she said, all these negative things are happening, but people forget that every day, all over the world, people get up in the morning, they lead decent, normal lives, they raise their families, they feed their families and so on, and try to give their kids as best a life as possible, and lead decent, ordinary lives. And we forget about them because the news is never about them. The news is all about what's going on. It's bad. So there's a lot of good going on. For example, I like the AI revolution. I think there's a lot of hopeful developments there. ChatGPT and all the rest of the bunch. Grok and everybody else. It's amazing. It's mind-boggling. Now, they also pose serious problems. Use of water, energy, etc., like environmental issues. But I guess it's our destiny as human beings to have to cope with a variety of problems and do our best to solve them, such as like this displacement issue that I mentioned, and homelessness is another one.
Yep.
So at a very basic level, say if you're a Christian, maybe not everybody's a Christian, but as an example, you got to wonder, okay, Christ shows up on earth. There's all these problems. He didn't solve all the problems all at once. I mean, he dealt with problems every place he went or whatever, or whoever you may, Muhammad or whatever. It's our job to deal with what we can at the moment and what's on our plate. And I walk by people every day who are begging or, asking for some money, some help. And every day I face this issue. Like, what's my view on this? Who am I? That's a
Right.
question to me. Who am I? What kind of person am I? How do I deal with these people? And it's, sometimes it's not a pleasant question to ask, you know.
Yeah.
But I mean, you got to do the best you can with the problems you got on your plate. Do the best you can. And I admire, forgive me, I'm just wandering all over the place, but if at any time you feel too down on what's going on in the world, just go to a hospital. Check out. Recently had some friends in the hospital. You go in there, you see what those people are saying, what kind of, troubles they got, and you think to yourself, you think you got problems? Like, you lucky dog. Come on, get the hell out of here. You get to work on your own problems. And same with America. I know there's good people in America. It's not all dark. There's a lot of really great leaders in America. And I don't think America's finished yet. I have great hope for America. It's going to turn around, I think. But when and,
Well, right. I was just going to ask you, when do you think that
I'll give you a wild guess, okay? Believe it or not, I think Ukraine's going to win the war against Russia. Sooner or later. It may take a long time. But in one way or another, Putin's going to collapse, either economically or militarily or politically. And when he does, that's going to weaken Trump's connection to Putin. And Xi and all these other guys, that's one. And I don't see Gaza going on forever either. There's got to be a day when that's going to be over. And these are our most immediate now there's, Sudan and so on in Africa that's not even talked about, but there's a huge problem down there too. But these conflicts, if we can just hang in there long enough, can turn the world around in terms of the rule of law and international human rights and so on. And they're linked. If Putin goes down, China is going to be in trouble, and so is North Korea and so on. But if he's not, the alternative is Putin wins. You can expect from Ukraine a mass exodus of people, up to 20 million people coming out to the West. That's going to, upset all of Western Europe in terms of, how do you deal with the 20 million refugees? Economically, a bit, like just a disaster. But my sense is, and it doesn't look like you can't predict it, but it's a fight between people who care about their families and their country versus a bunch of soldiers who don't know why they're there, but they're there because they're making some money, and guys behind them shooting them if they turn around.
Yeah.
It's just now that's maybe that's naive or whatever, but I'd be looking there as one possible breakthrough. If that thing falls apart, if Putin falls apart, that's going to be a major. In that scenario, one of the big things is nuclear arms.
Yes.
And the world has forgotten that Ukraine gave up its nuclear arms to Russia as part of the Budapest Agreement in 1994 on the promises of the US and the UK and France and China to respect the sovereignty, and Russia, of course, respect the sovereignty and independence of Ukraine. So I think that war is a fundamental war about, in World War II, 50 million people died. 50 million people. Why? One of the big reasons was because of borders. It was a fight over borders. Hitler invaded Poland, etc. And we've managed to avoid major conflict for 75, 80 years since then. But now all of a sudden we have a border issue again.
Yeah.
It's saying we haven't learned that lesson yet. We have to learn that lesson again. But if we can learn that lesson again, or at least get it back to where it's supposed to be, the international world, the rule of law, international rules-based order will be reaffirmed. And it has to be, because the other route is, I don't know, back to the Middle Ages, like darkness. So
that feels like where we're going.
Yeah. But I just don't see it. I don't see the world. Even people in Russia, even people in China, even people in North Korea don't agree with what's going on. I think they're, from the people, I know people in China, who they don't, they try to lead decent lives, but, they're under Xi and the Communist Party. But there are people who don't agree with what's going on in China. So that's just internal, never mind the conflict external that's involved. But these are, when I was younger, I thought, I'm not going to comment on things unless I know something about them. I should know something. And by something, I meant I should study them, read books on them, and come up. Right. But as I get older, I realize I can't know everything. There are entire libraries that I'll never read, that I'll never get, I have to inform myself on all these issues worldwide and do the best I can, and then take a stand on the issue. Like the case of Gaza is a difficult case for me. Like I'm not as, I can't say I'm an expert on the Middle East. I believe in the two-state solution. I think it can be resolved. And I think that's the direction the world has to go in. But I'm not, there are people who have studied Israel and the formation of Israel and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict all their lives. So I don't have the same level of exposure to that as they do. But I believe it's incumbent on us to be as informed as we can be and to take positions on issues such as what I consider to be a genocide at the moment in Gaza. People are dead. And, I'm not happy about it. I'm not happy about what, what happened to Israel, at the start of this thing. At the start, when the attack took place, that was that. I condemn that. I don't like Hamas. I know Hamas is connected. Believe it or not, Putin has a hand in Hamas as well, in training Hamas and back in the day and so on. So they're all sort of like
connected.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to ask you, going back to immigration, one of the things that we hear from immigration officials, Holman in particular, is that illegal immigrants don't have any rights. That's fundamentally false, is it not?
Yes, it's false. Constitutional rights. They even have constitutional rights. Due process. Depends, it depends on your level of being in the United States also. If you were new arrival, your rights are not as strong as someone who's been around for 10 years. I'm at this moment, I can't spell off all the rights that a person has just off the top of my head. But, the right to counsel, the right to you can't be deported without a hearing. You have a right to have a judge decide your case and decide whether you are deportable. Certainly things like getting on a plane in the middle of the night and flying off to El Salvador or wherever else these kids were going to be flying to is way off the Richter scale in terms of what rights people have. But there are little things like if you're in your home, someone's knocking on your door and they don't have a warrant, you don't have to open the door. You don't have to talk to them. You say, go away, uh, as an example. Um, and I'll just draw, this is a strange analogy, but to me, it has meaning. I think about the Nuremberg trials at the end of World War II. And they wanted to get the Nazi leaders, and punish them for the war. And one of the issues was, could they give them a fair trial? And the American and English jurists and, the Allied jurists went out of their way to make sure that the hearings were conducted in a way where they can honestly say that the defendants accused had a right to a hearing, an impartial hearing, and to state their case and their defense before being judged, and whether a decision is made about whether they were guilty of the crimes alleged and whether they should be punished. And one of the legal issues there was there were the prosecutor and judges involved in those proceedings, who themselves could have been considered complicit. For example, later on in Bloodlands and other books, it's been made clear that the World War II was started by not only Hitler but also Stalin in 41. Well, 39, the two invaded Poland and divided it up between them, and Molotov-Ribbentrop and all that. So one of the big issues was, notwithstanding the defects, the defendants were given, and in the books, the people from America that wrote the books, I forget the judges involved, but the American judges wrote about their memoirs and wrote how they conducted the hearings. They were very concerned to make sure that the defendants got a fair trial. And if you can give those people a fair trial, surely in America, you can give these people a fair hearing, be treated fairly in terms of how they are. Like masked men operating at night, arresting people on the street and taking them in detention without lawyers, without giving them some sense of what's going on, by putting them on airplanes, flying them to countries that they don't belong in. Like, where did this come from? Like, that's like way out of line with what should be happening. I don't believe in masked police.
Yeah, I don't either.
I don't think that should. So even things like that, but I'm, of all the people, I'm very sympathetic to the 11 million people who are in the U.S. and are undocumented. Of that 11 million, it might be more, 13, I don't know. Pew Center is doing research on that. They always come up with numbers, and I think it's more now. It might be 13 or whatever. But let's say it's 11 million. Of those people, about 1.5 are criminals in the sense they have committed crimes or are accused of committing crimes. So, okay, those people have no problem deporting or removing them or whatever. Deal with them as you will, fairly, but get them out. But as for the rest, because the guy's an overstay and he's married to an American woman, or his kids are American, or they've spent, and all these cases, and 2/3, I believe, of them have spent over 10 years in the United States. Like, there's got to be a way to deal with these people fairly, apart from, arresting them. And it seems like the administration is trying to get rid of these people as secretly and as quickly as they can, without any hearings, any uh, exposure to lawyers to protect their rights and to give them a fair chance to defend themselves.
Yeah. How
That's
hard is it to actually, because my understanding is that it's quite hard to become a citizen of this country through going through the quote unquote legal means of citizenship. Would you say that we need immigration reform to make the pathway to citizenship a lot easier?
that's the number one target for Congress, is they got to get the comprehensive immigration reform. That's what, you got to lock them up in some room and say you can't get out until you make a decision, until you come together and make
Right.
develop a comprehensive immigration program that addresses all the major questions in some way on a compromise basis. And that includes, more judges,
Yes.
like the backlogs in terms of asylum claims are outrageous. People are waiting 7-8 years to get an asylum claim done. That's not good either for them if they're justified, or for America if they should be deported. You got to make decisions quicker. Addressing the border issues there's no easy solution to the border issue. There's no, I don't think anybody can give you a perfect answer to how to deal with the border. I can tell you this, and my answer would be like this: that the criminal justice system does not catch every criminal is no reason to abolish or complain about the criminal justice system. You do the best you can. And I think that's about the best you can do on the southern border. You got to stem the flow, make sure that people are not coming across illegally, but are being dealt with immigration officials that sort out who's justified and who's not, and turn away those who are not justified. But some will slip through, even with a border 20 foot high, with a wall. They'll go under, around, over. There'll still be illegal people coming into the United States. But it's been like that always. It's not like this is a new problem we just developed.
Right.
Maybe the mass of people, the number recently has been a great source of concern. But forever, as long as I've been an attorney, that's been a problem. And it's a matter of degree. And unfortunately, it's sort of like, if you can't cure the disease, at least you can, provide medicine and limit the damage involved. I think that's the best we'll get on that front.
Yeah. What should people do if they're here? And I want to also just kind of mention that it's not just quote unquote illegal or undocumented immigrants that have been snagged up in this. U.S. citizens have actually been snagged up by ICE.
Yeah.
And I guess my question is, what rights do people have when they're approached by ICE? What do you recommend that they do when they're approached by ICE, or even the police in general?
Well, given the current circumstances, if, let's say, you are undocumented, I would recommend that you get in touch with lawyers that are local to your area, and discuss with those lawyers what can be done, and that you have a contact, because you may need it. There are organizations that have published, the American Civil Liberties Union and others, that have published a kind of a step-by-step what you should do or should not do when you're confronted by ICE officials. But the basics are, you can, first of all, you don't have to answer any questions other than identify who you are. It's not, you can't be assumed to be guilty and have to prove your innocence. You can remain silent. They have no right to arrest you willy-nilly without some proof that there's a warrant for your arrest or some reason for why they are arresting you. You should not take it upon yourself to make statements without presence of counsel guiding you in terms of your defense and what's happening. You should know what they are after in terms of dealing with you, like, well, why are you being confronted? Why are you being arrested? If you're being arrested, if you're at home, someone's at the door, you don't have to open the door, you don't have to deal with them unless they have a signed warrant. You should look at the warrant to see, is your name properly there? Is the address right? Is the date right? And what does the warrant say in terms of what they want from you? If there is a warrant and it's in order, then you would have to open the door and allow the agents in to to deal with you. But I think one of the best pieces of advice I can give is Google or ChatGPT. Ask, what are my rights as an immigrant in the United States in facing ICE, and you'll get they have these charters that you can work from to work with in terms of answering that question. The American Civil Liberties Union in particular can answer that, as can others. AILA is the American Immigration Lawyers Association. I'm a member of their group. They have a printout on that as well if you want to look it up. Google that or ChatGPT.
And I want to mention your law firm too here, pacelawfirm.com.
Right.
What kind of, you're an immigration lawyer.
Right.
What are some of the most shocking cases that you've come across?
Wow. Okay. Let's see. Well, first of all, my main work has to do with visas, getting visas to go in and out of the United States. But I'll give you one example. This is pretty shocking to me. I had a physician in New York who had married a Canadian girl and was trying to get her to immigrate to the United States on a marriage-based, spousal-based, family-based petition. In the process of that case, we learned that she was suffering from cancer and she was dying. And it was our hope that we could bring her, for her to live with him in the final stages of her life. And we appealed to the immigration authorities to allow her to come in on that basis, providing medical evidence and so on. And it was just stuck in the bureaucracy. And no matter what we did, first my appeals, then through the American Immigration Lawyers Association, then we appealed to senators, Congress and senators who wrote in letters asking for the administration to process the case in due course so that the woman could come and live with the husband given her circumstances. And we were unable to move the administration to grant the request for her to come in. She died without being able to come and be with the husband in the United States. That's one example. But I'm not, because I'm in Toronto, I'm not involved in the day-to-day sort of like arrest and coming to see people in jail and trying to relieve them from custody, that area. There are attorneys who specialize in those kind of, in the litigation in that kind of area, that are better qualified to deal with those issues than I am. But generally, a big concern in immigration, apart from wrongful arrest and deportations, are waivers. I'll just give you another example. A client of mine was driving to the United States. He was stopped at a port of entry between Canada and the United States. And they decided to do a search of his car. They did a search and they called in a police officer with a canine, a dog, to do a search for drugs. The dog smelt a cigarette butt and signaled that there was probably marijuana uh, remnants on the cigarette butt, but there was not enough there for the police officer to make an arrest or charge the individual with violation of the drug laws, which federally at the moment still regard marijuana as an offense, even though at the state level, many states, you can buy marijuana and smoke all you want. So this guy got blocked, and the police officer, the sheriff who came in and was called because it was supposedly a criminal offense, told him, listen, I can't charge you with anything. Go home, come back another day and see what happens. So he came back a few days later and was allowed in. And now, I think it's probably about 3 years later, he's still plagued by this incident back at the border in his efforts to gain stature in the United States. Because at every stage when he makes an application, they say, you need a waiver of inadmissibility because of this event that happened at the port of entry back 3 years ago. So his whole life is frozen, shall we say. He's unable to gain the right to work and also to live in the U.S. because everything is suspended related to this waiver. And it's been our argument all along that there's no waiver needed because there was no offense, really. And he didn't know where did this cigarette butt came from. It wasn't his cigarette butt. It was in the car, in the cigarette,
Right.
in the ashtray. But he didn't have any explanation for why it was in the ashtray, but it was there. But it wasn't a marijuana cigarette. It was a butt that evidently the dog felt or identified as having some lingering elements of marijuana to it. So there's this incongruity between the state and the federal laws on marijuana, and between Canada and the U.S. on marijuana. So, because Canada, it's legal in Canada federally.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But in the States, it's not legal federally.
Wow.
So that's been a problem area. But I suspect that the kind of cases you were looking for in your question of impropriety or extreme harm to people are not ones that I can identify like off the top of my head.
Well, going back to the doctor and
Right.
his wife, I think there's an assumption among many Americans that if you marry somebody, they automatically become a citizen of the country. That's not true. That's not, however, the case at all, though, is it?
No, unfortunately, it's not. What you can do is sponsor someone to come as a spouse, but they have to immigrate to the United States, and ultimately they may gain citizenship after they become permanent residents. And getting permanent residence in a situation like that usually takes about a year or so in terms of processing time. And in that case I cited, it was an alarming element. The poor woman was dying, and the guy just really wanted his wife, to be with him it was in New York, actually. And it was I've felt a failing of not being able to humanely deal with the problem. And there was just no way, even with Senate interventions,
Yeah.
we just could not move the administration to approve the case. And there are cases like that all the time. A big problem in immigration, a huge problem in immigration, is processing. Like, that's the bane of a lot of people who are in the system and waiting for years to get approved for whatever they've applied for. And it's an irritant that is felt universally. It doesn't matter if you're rich or poor, and no matter what area you're in, whether it's a spouse, family member, a guy applying for permanent residence as an investor, a guy trying to get a visa to work in the United States. The processing times are a real irritant. And if the government, let's put it this way, if you wanted to be a great immigration leader, if you addressed the processing times and kept them within reasonable periods, you'd be doing America a great service and Americans a great service.
Yeah. I also want to ask you, and forgive me if this is outside of your purview. What is this? Recently, the Trump administration removed the X gender marker on immigration forms.
Yes.
And what does that mean for non-binary and trans immigrants?
Well, to give you a direct answer, we have such a case where, given that circumstance, we're applying for citizenship in the Caribbean for an individual in order to circumvent the problem of being identified or not being able to identify the way they would like to identify in terms of passports and stuff like that. And it's that's like a very difficult question for the LGBTQ community to grapple with. Because of the concern about mistreatment at ports of entry, if you're being presented, and your quandary about how you identify your gender,
right?
Given those circumstances, in my view, it's a human right issue, and
absolutely.
Why not just call everybody males? Well, why have a female? Let's just call everybody males and see how that goes. Is the way I see it. We've gone far beyond that in terms of our development as humane and civilized human beings. The world is changing. We have to adapt. I'll tell you a little insight on that. I was not that informed. And while I was generally, sort of, okay, I get it, gays exist in society and so on, back in the day. In my case, I was contacted by some gays who were arrested in Canada in a sauna, a gay sauna, because there was a crackdown by the police on gay saunas. And so I ended up representing a couple of gay people in that area. And I lost the case, unfortunately. I couldn't win the case. I tried to call the director of the YMCA to say, listen, the same services that this spa was providing are being provided by the YMCA. What's the big deal? But he couldn't come out to be a witness in our case. And anyway, we lost. So I was on the side, but I wasn't really informed and really like 100%. Shall we say, I still didn't have a clear understanding of the area. But my daughter, who's not gay, but who has great affection for people who are gay and she's very sympathetic on it, used to hammer away at me on weekends when we would go for supper on my bigotry and, what's wrong with you, Dad? Come on, you're supposed to be a human rights lawyer. And over time, the lights came on. I figured, oh, okay. Gee, where have I been all this time? Even when I was like defending these guys. I didn't have it yet.
Yeah.
And I confess, and Biden did the same thing, I think, or was it Obama or Biden? I don't remember. Was it Obama?
I believe it was Obama. Well,
Yeah.
Biden too, but I think it was what you're referring to was Biden changing Obama's position on same-sex marriage.
Yes. So it takes, you have to deal with the question and inform yourself and then take a position on it. And we mature. I used to go to movies and eat popcorn and throw the popcorn bag on the floor and have a Coca-Cola and throw the cup on the floor until they put on they taught us, hey, pick up the garbage that you're bringing in and put it in the waste baskets. So now I pick it up and take it to the waste basket. You learn as you go along. As a human being, you got to learn and become, we're progressing. That's how we become more sensitive. Climate change. I didn't know anything about climate, but now I'm very alarmed by where we're going with the climate.
Yeah.
And so these things evolve, and we have to try and be as best we can informed.
Yeah. I wanted, before we run out of time too, I wanted to ask you about the human impact of ending temporary protected status.
Big impact. Listen, you come to the U.S., like let's say you're from Haiti or Venezuela or Ukraine or wherever it is, and you're there and things go wrong back home. And so they introduce temporary protective status for you. They say, okay, anybody from Haiti who's here from this time on, they're protected because back home is terrible and you can't go back home. So now you got protective status. You're building a life. You have children. You're sending them to school. You're working. Your wife is working, whatever. And then along comes an administration that says, okay, we're canceling all temporary protective status. Now, wait a minute. When you were elected, you said you're going to get rid of the criminals. But these people are not criminals. They're temporarily protected because things back home are terrible. That has nothing to do with criminality. And many of these people who are being deported not because they're criminals, but because, it's the whole board. You in your editorial pointed out how loose the situation is with deportation. I was called recently. There's a kid in New York right now he has a minor offense. He was selling some goods without a license, and he got caught. And so now he's gonna have to pay a fine. But that kid is, not him, but his parents are alarmed because they're very fearful that he's going to get deported because he's got this infraction.
Yeah.
And my big concern is I cannot predict with any certainty how the administration will conduct its legal affairs. I can't say for sure that, if you're a permanent resident, you have nothing to worry about unless it's a crime of moral turpitude, which it isn't. Because they're deporting even citizens.
Yeah.
It's unpredictable. So the rule of law is eroding before our very eyes. Like we're walking around. You and I could be deported in the United States. Like, it's that bad. And I mean, we have to work to get ourselves back on track.
Yeah.
Person by person. Start with, hey, you, my friend, was Trump elected legally or illegally? What's the deal with January 6th? Get an answer. If it's the right answer, hey, come on with me. Let's work on this. If it's the wrong answer, say, well, God bless you. Hopefully in time you might figure it out. That's the way I would start. Of all the people, and I in my own circle of friends have people who believe that January 6th was good and that Trump actually, the election was stolen. smart, intelligent people who still believe that. What can you do?
Yeah, it is scary that people can be so deceived that they don't see reality.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the solution to that is.
Well, I asked myself, am I the one that's blind? Am I the one that's making mistakes? Like, do I see black and white properly, or is there something wrong with my judgment? One of the big things America is suffering from is the infusion into America of massive amounts of wealth from people who have, these guys have stolen millions, trillions from countries in Africa and, Eastern Europe or wherever. And, there's money laundering going on. And these oligarchs are coming to the United States, and that money is polluting the political environment.
Absolutely.
Like in the world right now, there are trillions of dollars sloshing around in bank accounts all over the place, much of it stolen or, illicit funds.
Yeah.
And there's not the policing that's needed in order to return those funds to the places where they belong, or somehow deal with these guys got yachts, they're floating around in the seas in huge yachts with helicopters landing on them and stuff like that. Where's that money come from?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, it's disturbing for sure. Andy, I want to thank you again for coming on the program. And I want to, where can people find you?
pacelawfirm.com. You can find me there. And I'd be happy to, talk with anybody. Just send me an email. You can send an email, andy@myworkvisa.com is a sort of a private email that I use for, general things. Or through Pace Law Firm, you'll find me there, and you can get an email to me through my law firm.
Perfect. Well, thank you again for coming on the program. I know that your time is valuable, and you're doing God's work for sure.
Sean, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciated the opportunity of being on the program, and I admire you for your work. I think it's really great, important work you're doing.
Thank you so much. And that's been Coup Save America, everyone. Tune in next week, and we will see you next week. Thank you.